this is an in-office interrogation for a Medtronic dual chamber pacemaker. We can see that the date of visit is August 16th of 2022. This device was implanted February 28th of 2020, and it looks like there's a note for that the patient has a history of ATIF and sinus node dysfunction. If you take a look a little bit further down, it's just going to give you, this quick look overview of what's been going on. We can see that our impedances are nice and stable, well within range. It's going to show you your atrial lead model number as well as your RV. You're also going to see the last measured capture threshold and when it was measured, obviously August 16th of 2022. We can see what our programmed outputs are and pulse widths, as well as measured P wave amplitude and R wave amplitude, along with program sensitivity. So just a nice quick look to see, are things programmed appropriately with that 2-to-1 pacing and sensing safety margin. We can see our mode, typically AAIR to DDDR. We mode switch at 171 beats per minute, as well as just our typical everyday device settings and our delays. We can see that the Medtronic therapies for ATAF are off. I have found that algorithm with both Medtronic and Abbott are very specific to certain physicians if they have that on or not. It's basically AF suppression, so keep a lookout for that. We're going to see clinical status. This is going to be from the previous year. And then our cardiac compass trends, which is just kind of an overlook of ATIF and patient activity in the last few months. So we can see since last year, we've had a total of 3 greater than 4 beat VT episodes and 2 ATAF episodes, with the total time in ATAF less than 1 hour, less than 0.1 hours per day. If we take a little bit, go down here a little bit, we're going to see that we are pacing less than 0.1%, and their MVP is on. So that is that algorithm that searches for intrinsic conduction to maintain the least amount of V pacing that we can have, which is always beneficial for the patient in a pacemaker. This is another quick observation that there was a greater than 6-hour ATAF episode for 1 day. And just more of these graphs that we typically see, just different ways of visualizing the data. This is going to be a snapshot of total ATAF in the past year, but you can see that this is July of 2021 through July of 2022. Looks like there was just kind of a blip here. And then if we look at V rates during ATAF, kind of the same thing here, that one probably long episode, but overall it looks like the patient is pretty well rate controlled. Again, everybody uses these types of graphs differently. Here's our pacing per day. We know that the patient is paced quite a bit in the atrium, and in the ventricle very little, which is what we want. It's also going to show us day and night. So it looks like, during the day, this patient is somewhat pacing in their ventricle, but not much. Patient activity, pretty low. Be curious to see how old the patient is. And then, of course, heart rate variability. I am unsure why this is blank here. Again, these I only really dive down into if I find an issue or a curious episode, something like that. So we'll keep looking down here. So we have prior to last session, which is going to be a February through August of the prior year reading, and then since the last session, which is August to the 12 months, we have a 6-month and then a 12-month trend, and we can compare our pacing percentages, which are actually very, very similar. If we saw like a big change in one of these, just other things to consider or to kind of keep an eye out. I don't see anything that looks out of range or that's a big jump in a number or a percentage at all. So pretty status quo here. And then if we take a look at our atrial rates, a little bit blunted here, you can see that they're A-paced, and then these A-senses are kind of at these higher numbers. Again, these are both comparing from prior session and then like 6 months to 12 months. So it would be interesting if there was a change that had been made at that prior session, if there was a change in the histogram. So just different ways to take a look at things and to track. If you were to make maybe a programming change to the sensor at this check, it would be a great graph to look at next time that patient comes in to see if that rate is being distributed a little bit more appropriately. So we'll keep scrolling down here. This is just talking about your ventricular rates during ATAF. We are not in ATAF a whole lot, so nothing we really need to dive down into, but again, just another tool. So this is going to be our ATAF summary, and we have prior session, last session, and then device lifetime. So we can see, again, this is just talking about the percent of atrial pacing, average ATAF time per day, anything that was treated. I don't believe that algorithm is on. It looks like it's just on monitor. And we can see here that the sequences say 0, and that's because it's not on. So we'll keep going down this way. Battery estimate, again, that was on our quick look. This is just giving you what the estimate is, the minimum to the maximum. Obviously, this patient has plenty of device battery left. Battery voltage, just kind of a nice way, another measurement. Sometimes you'll see it in percent, sometimes you'll see it in voltage. Every company displays it a tiny bit different, but it's nice to kind of just take a look at that to see, just in case there was a big dip or something didn't look right. Are the other measurements within range? So short V to V intervals. So if there are greater than 300 counts, the device is telling you to check for signaling issues. We have that counter as well in Abbott, where it will show if there are counts that are less than 80 milliseconds. That can be indicative of far-field R-wave oversensing. So this is just another way that Medtronic's telling you, hey, if you're seeing over, greater than 300 counts in these short V to V intervals, check the sensing, make sure it's appropriate. The lead position check just says successful. I'm not exactly sure what that measures or why it's presented that way. I've seen that a lot. It must just be an algorithm built into it just to confirm that the wire is in the right place. And our lead impedances, again, these are the measurements that were already shown on that quick look, but you can see them broken down here again. So we'll just keep scrolling. So here is our pacing threshold test report, and we're looking at the atrial amplitude test threshold. So it's showing you how they ran it, and you can see that it was run bipolar DDD at a rate of 90. They extended out the delays to allow for intrinsic conduction, and you can see what the ending value was when they ran it. And then we can look at what the measured threshold was, and then of course our permanent programming. So we'll just scroll down. We're going to take a look at this freeze capture from the threshold test. First thing I like to point out is what is the configuration of the EGM, the intercardiacs that you're looking at. So this one shows that it's atrial tip to atrial ring. This is going to look at RV tip to RV ring, and this one is can to ring. So just be aware of that when you're running these. Their EGM configuration can be changed. So I would definitely have your Medtronic rep show you how to do that when you start getting hands-on with those programmers. So we can see here that the threshold test began at 1.5 volts at 4 milliseconds. We can see a nice atrial paced evoked response on the atrial configuration here. We have intact conduction. Had that delay been set tighter, you would most likely be seeing ventricular pace. So we're pacing. We have this nice wide paced complex, all with intrinsic conduction. We are decrementing as we go. A pace V sense, a pace V sense. This is your V sense channel here. we can see that we A-paced, we V-sensed, A-paced, V-sense. We're getting real low on amplitude to here. A-paced, V-sense, A-paced, V-sense. And this one right here, a little bit tricky to see, but you can see a slight change in morphology, and it looks like that test was ended at 0.25 volts. So I would also call this loss of capture here, and therefore our threshold is going to be 0.5 at 0.4, even though they came off pretty quick, but we knew we had capture up here, so that was okay. Keep scrolling down. So now we're looking at our V threshold test, and again, they ran this bipolar DDD with a rate of 90, and a pulse. They got a threshold of 1.5 at 0.4. So you can see that the permanent programming, they have you at 2.75 at 0.4. And it looks like, I don't know what this acute phase completed means. Maybe that was part of one of the auto threshold tests before. I'll have to look into that. But let's take a look at the actual EGM. So here again, the EGM configuration has changed. So we are can to ring. We are A tip to A ring here, and then RV tip to R ring here. So RV ring here. So here we can see we have just, A paced. You can see that evoked response here, and then there's our intrinsic V, and then A paced, V sense, A paced, V sense. Here the test has started, and they have tightened up those delays. So now we're seeing a atrial pace with a paced ventricular response here. So you can see that that morphology is completely different from this intrinsic morphology here. So we're going to follow that along. Pace, 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 pace. And if you look here, your morphology here is completely different than the previous one. And you can also see this on their the far field channel, that configuration is different as well. So I would definitely call that threshold right here, which is in that like 1.25 measurement. So we will scroll down here, and it's going to show you your arrhythmia episode list. So August 17th of 2021 through August 16th of 2022, so 1 year, showing us that we had one non-sustained VT, and the duration was 1 second. And if we look here, we have ATAF at 28 seconds. So we will take a look at those. And then it's going to show us our last CareLink monitor session was May 17th of 2022. And these were the episodes that were already transmitted in at that time. Sometimes it's helpful to go back and look at those if you have the ability through the monitoring site. If you need to compare anything, or if your patient, said that they felt something prior to the in-office interrogation that may not show up on the actual programmer. Scroll through here. So my favorite scatter plots. This is the one for the non-sustained VT back in July. So let's take a look to see what that EGM looks like. So again, look at these configurations. I do not know why their actual waves are not showing on this. I found that kind of confusing on a lot of their episodes. It'll just be kind of blank, and then when it starts recording, it'll almost show like the termination of it. But this looks pretty regular here. And then all of a sudden, the rate does speed up a little bit, but we're kind of just relying on their markers here. And it looks like it's 1-to-1. So that one I would probably call just SVT. But again, since it was so short, nothing to write home about. Here's another EGM, another scatter plot. So this is the one that shows an ATAF monitor of 28 seconds. So let's take a look and see what this one shows. So we're pacing, we're conducting, we're pacing, we're conducting. All of a sudden, our atrium just started to speed up on its own. So that's what our ATAF is. Not a long episode. And here again, we're just kind of relying on the markers. It would be nice to see the waves here, because this absolutely could be something falling into blanking here. Again, not a huge find, but obviously just a good idea to take a look, at it, especially as you're learning. Nothing I would probably reprogram, but we're continuing on here with our episode. You can see that the patient did time out and V-pace a couple times here. So just a little noteworthy there, nothing to write home about. So I'm going to just kind of keep scrolling down. So this is going to be our final session summary. So here we can see our wires. We can see that the device was implanted in February of 2020, but our wires are actually from 2021. So this was obviously a generator change when this was swapped out. So no wonder we have such great battery longevity. These are going to be our final numbers here, final programming. And obviously it doesn't look like they made any changes here except for they turned on some different features. So they turned on the ATF daily burden alert, probably because of that one that was marked longer from before that had already been transmitted in through CareLink. The total ATF daily burden time, they went from 6 hours to 12, and then they just turned on monitored VT episodes, RV pacing greater than 40%, which is a good idea, especially since we know this particular patient is not pacing. If that were to change, we definitely want to know. And then it looks like they turned on a high threshold alert for their atrial and ventricular leads. If we just go down a little bit further, this is just more of the parameters. I don't think it ever hurts to keep a copy of the parameters. It's always nice to be able to go back and see if anything was changed. I know with saving all this stuff, these are kind of big files, but I have gone back to reference them. But again, this is just final parameters. So that's it for this one. Writing this up for a physician, I would put, obviously this was most likely a post-gen change check. It appears to be normal device function. The changes that were made, looks like they turned on the AutoCap tests, and you could make a note of just that long ATIF, which the only one we had was that 28-second one. But if there was a longer one from remotes, you could note that. And if I ever see anything like that, I do make a note and I'll just say previously transmitted on home monitoring. That way it's just kind of documented just in case it got overlooked. But normal device check.